When you think of Gal Gadot, you probably think of Wonder Woman, right? An Amazon princess, a symbol of strength and justice. But the real story of the actress who brought her to life is, well, way more complex than any superhero movie. See, in her home country of Israel, she's more than just a movie star. She's a national icon, a huge source of pride. This giant poster on a building in Tel Aviv says it all, really, celebrating her as our Wonder Woman. And yet, at the very same time, that same identity makes her a lightning rod on the world stage. The very thing that's celebrated at home makes her one of the most polarizing figures in Hollywood. So what's the real story here? Is she a progressive icon, a national ambassador, or a symbol of a conflict that's been going on for decades? To really understand this paradox, we have to go back to the very beginning. Her story really kicks off with two seemingly opposite paths that, believe it or not, would come to define her entire career. So get this. Just before starting her mandatory 2-year military service, her mom convinced her to enter the Miss Israel pageant pretty much on a whim. And to her total surprise, she won the whole thing. This timeline just lays out how wild her early life was. One minute, she's on a pageant stage. And by the way, she purposefully tanked her chances at Miss Universe because she didn't want to win. The next, she's in the Israeli Defense Forces as a combat fitness instructor. And then, while she's still serving, she makes a decision that changes everything. In 2007, she did this photo shoot for Maxim. Now, this wasn't just some random gig. It was part of an official Israeli campaign to change its public image and attract tourism. It caused some outrage among politicians back home, but internationally, it absolutely put her on the map. And that new profile, combined with her pretty unique background, paved her way to Hollywood in a really unexpected way. She was actually studying law at the time, thinking she was, and I quote, too serious and smart to be an actress. She auditioned for the Bond girl in Quantum of Solace. She didn't get it. But the casting director remembered her. Just 3 months later, that same casting director recommended her for Fast and Furious. And the director, Justin Lin, specifically loved her military experience. He actually worked her knowledge of weapons into the character Giselle Yashar. And she even did her own stunts. This role wasn't just a job, it was her launchpad. But it was her next role that would take her from a Hollywood mainstay and turn her into a global phenomenon. When Warner Bros. First announced she'd be the new Wonder Woman, the backlash was immediate. Fans of the comics were all over the internet arguing her body type was all wrong, that she was just too thin to play a powerful Amazon warrior. So how did she respond? With this number, 17. That's how many pounds of muscle she gained to become Diana Prince. And the training was absolutely grueling. We're talking 6 hours a day for 6 months, learning everything from swordsmanship to Brazilian jiu-jitsu. She later said the whole process was, in her words, much more intense than the army. But as her star got bigger, so did the scrutiny. Her identity as an Israeli and a former IDF soldier became totally inseparable from her public image, and that came with some very real consequences. And I mean tangible, real-world consequences. Her films, including Wonder Woman and Death on the Nile, have been outright banned in several countries, like Lebanon, Kuwait, and Tunisia. The reasons cited are almost always her 2 years of mandatory service in the IDF and her vocal support for Israel. For some, this is exactly what makes her so important. This editorial from the Jerusalem Post argues she represents a kind of soft power, humanizing Israelis for a global audience by playing a progressive character while being unapologetically Israeli. But her public appearances often become flashpoints. Her Hollywood Walk of Fame ceremony was the perfect example, completely disrupted by competing protests. Some people holding signs saying Snow White supports genocide, and others holding signs saying they were standing with Israel. On the other hand, some people are pretty skeptical about how much this kind of celebrity diplomacy actually accomplishes. As scholar Shayna Weiss puts it, there's a real question about whether this celebrity influence has any measurable or lasting effect at all. And all of this leaves her in a constant state of contradiction. She is, at the same time, one of the world's most beloved heroines and a symbol of one of its most difficult, intractable conflicts. Gadot herself has talked about this shift. In her own words, the conversation has changed. What was once a source of admiration is now, as she says, simply complicated. It leaves us with a final and pretty challenging question. What does the journey of an icon like Gal Gadot, who can't separate her art from her identity, tell us about the true price of fame in our deeply divided world?